A lot to discuss on this topic this morning, so we want to bring into the conversation the CEO of Jewish News Syndicate, Alex Traiman. Alex, always a pleasure having you on the show. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
So a lot of unanswered questions this morning, specifically for the family members of hostages still in Hamas captivity. Could you set the stage for us? How did we get to this point? Why did the airstrikes even happen in Gaza in the first place?
Well, we had a 6-week ceasefire where we saw the return of dozens of hostages, some of them in these cruel ceremonies, some dead in addition to the live returning hostages. It was part of a plan that was originally negotiated by the Biden administration back in May. But after President Trump won the election, he said that all the hostages needed to be released by the time he stepped into office. Of course, that didn't happen, but Hamas did agree to begin releasing hostages as part of this original deal brokered by the Biden administration. And the phase one of that deal went off with some hitches, but basically was carried out. But Israel is refusing to negotiate into what was called the phase two of that deal, which would have called for a permanent Israeli ceasefire. Israel does not want to see a permanent ceasefire as long as that would mean that Hamas remains the political and military force inside the Gaza Strip. They are adamant that Hamas must be removed completely from Gaza.
Alex, and we did promise the viewers this morning that as we conduct this interview, and thank you for agreeing to answer their questions, that we would ask some of their questions, because obviously they are seeing this conflict in real time and they want to make sure they are understanding from their perspective. On this Wednesday morning, William B. out of Tennessee, he's asking, do you think Israel was justified bombing after Hamas did not give up hostages?
Well, you have hostages that are being kept now for more than 500 days inside the Gaza Strip. Israel did accept the proposal that was put on the table by Trump's envoy, Steve Witkoff. Hamas refused that proposal. The only card that Hamas has against Israel is these hostages. This is the reason why they took the hostages to begin with. They're hiding them underneath the Gaza Strip in highly secure tunnels. And they're using this time of the ceasefire in order to regroup, rearm, and to secure their hold on the Gaza Strip. So Israel definitely feels that they are that they have the right to and are justified to continue bombing in Gaza. And apparently the Trump administration agrees with them.
Alex, as we further discuss the hostages still in Hamas captivity on this Wednesday, people wanting to know what is the latest as far as getting the rest of them home safely, and unfortunately, if they are not alive, at least getting their bodies. Is the Israeli government continuing to work to do that since that ceasefire is broken?
Yeah, there are hostage negotiations taking place in parallel with this return to fighting. But as Prime Minister Netanyahu has stated, that all negotiations are going to take place under fire. Hamas has been utilizing the ceasefire in order to rebuild and rearm, and they believe that as Israel holds itself back, that their cards improve. And so Netanyahu believes that by putting more military pressure on Hamas, this is going to get them to come to the negotiating table faster and maybe to give up more hostages sooner than later.
Alex, as we further discuss this conflict, we're seeing innocent people on both sides of the conflict, in Israel and Palestinian people impacted. We've seen Hamas using innocent Palestinian people as human shields out in Gaza. Sophia giving us this question this morning. She says, is it possible to keep people safe in Israel without completely eliminating Hamas?
In the long term, the answer is no. I mean, in the short term, Hamas does not pose too much of a threat to Israelis along the Gaza border, even though the Israeli government said that recently that they just uncovered a plan for Hamas to try to commit another cross-border attack. Not to mention that Hamas is pretty active in Judea and Samaria, in Jerusalem, and other places where you have a mixed Jewish and Arab populations. So they really seek to eliminate Hamas in its entirety in Gaza. And as Israel has learned over the years, once you enter into a temporary ceasefire with Hamas, and that's all a ceasefire is as far as Hamas is concerned, it's called a hudna, a temporary ceasefire, which allows them to rebuild and rearm, and then they break those ceasefires whenever they want. So, Israel after October 7th wants to completely change the paradigm and is not content to have a terrorist organization controlling land right along its border.
Alex, in that statement you just mentioned, I think that further adds to what Israel has been saying from the very beginning. This is a fight not against the Palestinian people, but a fight against Hamas. And that further adds to the looming question, what happens after all of the ceasefires are over? Where does Hamas go? Do they continue to terrorize Israelis as well as Palestinian people, or do they move to another area of the Middle East and terrorize them?
Right. What Israel would like to see is some kind of a ceasefire deal that would get the all of the hostages returned in one fell swoop, and to allow Hamas terror leaders to be exiled out of the country. Like that's their off ramp to this conflict. And if they refuse to return the hostages, and if they refuse to take the off ramp and take a ticket to another country, then Israel, I believe, is going to continue to fight this war. A question about Palestinian civilians that have elected Hamas, that have allowed Hamas to use their homes as well as other public infrastructure, including schools, mosques, and hospitals as staging grounds for attacks against Israelis, as the entrances to tunnels, as the storage houses for weapons. It's very difficult to tell at this point, the way Hamas operates militarily in the Gaza Strip, who is an innocent civilian and who's a terrorist.
Alex, thank you so much for that detailed breakdown and for answering the viewer questions this morning. Just in case people wanted to know, you did not have these questions ahead of the interview. You were seeing them as this interview was being conducted, further adding to the vulnerability and further adding to the authenticity of what we do here on Live Now from Fox. Before we go, Alex, the looming question this morning, where does Israel go from here? Where do the innocent Palestinian people go from here?
Well, there's still big questions about what happens to Palestinian civilians living in the Gaza Strip. President Trump said during his meeting with Prime Minister Netanyahu in the Oval Office that he sought to resettle all of the Gazans outside of the Strip, either in Egypt or in Jordan. Jordan basically suggesting that they would not be party to that kind of a plan, similar to Egypt. Israel's been looking at other options, including in Eastern Africa, Somalia, other countries. There are discussions about possibly having Syria be a destination for some Palestinians. Israel saying that it's not necessarily that all Palestinians must leave the Gaza Strip, which was the Trump position, but rather no Palestinians should be trapped in Gaza if they actually do want to leave the Strip of their own volition. And so Israel is trying to find some destinations, whether that's one destination or multiple destinations that Gazans could go if they want to exercise what should be a basic humanitarian right to flee a war zone.
Alex, always a pleasure having you join us here on Live Now from Fox. Thank you so much for your expertise and perspective on the topic. I hope you have a great rest of your day.
You too. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I want to give you all another live look out in Jerusalem here at 712 on the East Coast. And again, you can see protests underway on this Wednesday morning against Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. We are told that these protests will start here in the city center and transfer over to outside of his office and then even outside of his residence. We will be keeping a close eye on this conflict here on Live Now from Fox.